Hello, welcome to today's tutorial on how you can actually integrate GitHub Actions CI/CD with a Django-based project. Now, in the previous sessions, you have learned about what exactly are GitHub Actions and how you can actually set them up for a repository that GitHub. And today we'll be seeing how you can actually integrate GitHub Actions for a Django-based project and actually deploy your Django-based project to platforms such as Heroku. So yeah, without wasting any further time, let's get started. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll create a repository. So I'll just choose the repository name as, let's say, GitHub Actions Django tutorial, and we can create as a public repository, add a readme, and we'll just go ahead and create a repository. Now, of course, to get started with creating a Django project, first of all, what exactly is Django? So Django is a web backend framework for Python. So we have some other backend frameworks that have been written in Python, including Flask, Robin. Django is also one of the most commonly used ones, especially if you have a larger scale application. So the model view controller with Django is pretty famous. So it's also quite used for being able to deploy machine learning applications if you're creating a web-based application, and it's a very good backend to use, especially if you are working with a Python stack. So this is what we're going to be using. Now, in order to actually get like a sample application for Django, there are multiple ways you can actually do that. So one of the ways is you could install essentially a Python package for Django, and you can basically do that by using pip install Django. And once you actually do install Django, you can also find a lot of information regarding Django itself on the Django project, because it's an open source project, and you can definitely check it out if you want to dive deeper into how Django actually works. Some of the prerequisites that you would require is installing Python, and you can install the latest version of Python. I think it's Python 3.10, 3.11 that you can install and use locally on your system. So you'll have to install the Python package for Django, and then once you actually go ahead and install that, you can use the commands such as Django admin start project, which essentially creates a sample application for you. Now, that's of course one of the methods, but since today we are also going to be deploying our project on Heroku, so that is why we are actually going to be following this starter repository that has been provided by Heroku. Now, the reasons actually going ahead with this is that, first of all, it is very similar to being able to create your own Django project using the Django admin start project command as well. But of course, this is starter repository provided by Heroku with some additional configurations that allow us to do very easy deployment of the Django project that you have. Actually go ahead and deploy that on Heroku. Now, there are a couple of things that you'll keep in mind. Now, of course, we'll be going through the entire structure of how, the Django structure actually looks like. The two things that you'll find over here, if we specifically look at the requirements.txt, is defines what all different Python packages are going to be used in a single project. So you can actually go ahead and install all your dependencies using this as well. So the one that we are going to be seeing over here is the gunicorn. So gunicorn is essentially a Python package that allows you to handle HTTP requests. So since Django is a web framework, we'll be using the gunicorn. It is actually subset being created from the original Ruby unicorn. So it's used to mainly handle all of that, and essentially we configure our Python file, that is the Django project, with the proc file. This is what is essentially used to actually help you to deploy your project, get your deployed server running. So you need to actually configure that. In case you're not deciding to use this getting started tutorial file, you can set up your own project first with the let's say Django admin project, and after that, what you can actually also do is you can set up your proc file, set up your WSGI and your Unicorn to enable your web server, the Django web server, to actually get deployed and be hosted on, let's say, a platform like Heroku. Or if you're not, let's say, using Heroku, you're using some other platforms such as DigitalOcean or, let's say, AWS, GCP, you would need that configuration as well. But that comes in handy directly with this starter project that we'll be using today's reference for the Django project. Now, of course, you have a guide as well that you can actually follow. So the simple thing that you just have to do is clone this starter repository. So that is what we'll go ahead and actually do that. First, we'll go ahead and clone this Python getting started repository. Now, of course, that's the first thing that we'll be doing. So let's actually create a new folder inside of the desktop. So we'll just call it, let's say, Django. So we'll just create a new folder by the name of Django, and we'll navigate to this particular folder, and we will do the git clone, and we'll install this starter project. We'll also just clone our repository that we have just created right now for the tutorial as well, and we'll just go ahead and do it git clone, and we will just go ahead and actually And now what we'll do is we'll just simply go ahead and actually copy the content that we have from our Python getting started and just put that into the repository that we have just created. So I'll just go ahead and put that across in our project, and let's replace this and go ahead and quickly copy over the remaining documents as well. So this should be it, I guess. Let's just confirm. So we have our till runtime.txt, and you can also just copy the gitignore in our project folder. So alright, great. This should be enough. So we'll just quickly go ahead and actually open this repository within our project. So we'll just go to Django and we'll select our Actions Django project. So of course, what you can see over here is all of the different files that we have. So this is the starter repository. Now each and every Django project has a certain set of files that we usually have. So first, for example, is the manage.py. This is your main file, and then of course all of your files will live inside of the rest of your project. That's mainline in the getting started, and of course all of your tests, models, views which are part of the Django project will live in under this particular hello repository, so the hello directory. So now what we'll go ahead and do is, in order to basically set up our repository, you can actually go ahead and get started with following this tutorial. So the first thing that we are going to be doing is we are going to be creating a virtual environment. So let me just quickly go ahead and open up a terminal. So the very first thing that we'll actually go ahead and do is we'll set up a virtual environment. Now this is useful to essentially install all of your dependencies within this virtual environment, and that's one of the things that you usually do with any Python project that you do by creating a virtual environment. So in order to essentially install, you can basically copy this particular command, which is essentially installing the virtual environment Python package. So once we actually do that, now in case you are on a Windows machine, there will be a separate step, but in order to do that either on a Mac or on a Windows device, you can just follow this command that is the source command. And once you actually use this, which goes into the venv and activate, it actually activates the virtual environment for you. So we'll be installing all of our project dependencies within this virtual environment. So once you have done that, of course, if you are to install all of your dependencies, you can actually do that one by one using pip install, and we are using the flag -r for a read, and give the details of the requirements.txt that allows you to install all of the necessary specific Python packages that need to be installed using this. So we are just going to be using this, and as you can see that it has started to install all the dependencies that have been mentioned in the requirements.txt, which is Django, Unicorn, and Django Heroku. So once this installed, we are good to go. So it has installed all the necessary Python packages. Now, of course, the next step that we have to do is, in order to basically enable your Django project to collect all the local assets, that essentially, all what do we mean by the local assets? It's all the static files that we have. That includes things such as your HTML files that will essentially serve as your static files, and of course anything related to your JavaScript files, your styling files, or let's say you have some static elements such as images, videos. All of those need to be collected by Django. So for that, we actually run this command python manage.py collect static that allows you to basically collect all of your files. We'll go ahead and use this over here, and this should allow us to copy all this static files so that Django can actually use them. So at this point of time, we are pretty much set up with our project. Now in order to just test run our project, we can go ahead and just say python manage.py and then run server. That allows you to actually run your project locally inside of your system. So that will be exposed at the endpoint localhost 8000. So we just simply have to go to localhost 8000, and you can see that this is the project landing page getting started with Python on Heroku. So this is what is the starter project, and you can actually see all the static files that we have within the templates. So these are all the templates that we have. For example, this is the index.html that you see over here, that is rendering over here, which you can actually also see in this particular file. So once we run that command for being able to actually go ahead and use like the collect static, it collects all the static files that we have, and it will use them so that we can actually start using them with our Django project. So now that we are done with this, we can actually go ahead and test out a few different things. So essentially, since we are going to be using the cicd tool, the first thing that we'll actually go ahead and do is we'll create our .github folder. .github directory. So let's go ahead and do that. And within this, we'll define our workflows directory, and we can create a file name known as Django.yaml. So this is where we'll be declaring all of our YAML configurations, and that's what we're actually going to be doing. So the first thing, of course, that we'll start off is like whenever we create any YAML file, we specifically for a GitHub action, the first thing in the workflow that we define is the name. So over here we can define the name as like, let's say Django GitHub action, which will allow us to actually go ahead, build, test, and look for linting, and actually go ahead and actually deploy it to Heroku as well. So we'll start off by this. Now, of course, again, we need to, the next thing that we actually go ahead and define is what exactly, when does this workflow actually needs to get invoked. So of course, for doing that, we will basically go ahead and define on. So whenever a specific action will be performed, in this case, like let's say that we want to do that on a push event, and we can also of course go ahead and define it has to be on a particular branch, or like let's say if it has to be specifically invoked, or the workflow has to run on a particular pull request. So the syntax that you can actually follow for that would be that the first thing that you'll do is you define your push, and additionally you can also define the branches on which this should be invoked, instead of having it on all the branches. So like let's say I want it for main. Similarly, if you also want like let's say this to get invoked on a pull request, so you can actually define that as well, and then you can define on which particular branch as well if you want. So these are some of the ideas. For now, we'll just keep it simple, and we'll just define it as an on event on a push event, that when it will basically get invoked on a push event. Then we basically have to define our jobs. So the first job for us would be the build job, to ensure that yes, everything is configured perfectly. So the first thing that we'll define is runs on. That will enable us to know, okay, what is the runner. So in this case, let's use the default runner that is provided by GitHub, that is the Ubuntu latest one. And then of course, the next thing that we can actually also do over here is, especially because with Python, you might have different versions of Python. Now we have a concept within GitHub Actions known as GitHub Action Matrix. So we'll just quickly show what exactly is a GitHub Action Matrix. What it allows you to actually do is that in case you might have multiple jobs, you can actually run them parallelly by defining this matrix. And the way you actually do is that within your job, you define the strategy keyword. And in this, you can actually define different types of job configurations. So an example for that would be, let's say if you want to test your Python project on different versions of Python, let's say Python version 3.8, 3.7, 3.9, 3.10. So you can actually define this within this strategy. And you can define that how many jobs, separate configurations actually need to run at the same time parallelly. So that's what we are going to be just introducing today inside of this particular one. So we can say that we can define the strategy, and within the strategy, the first thing that let's say we can define is that how many jobs should actually run parallelly together. So let's say in this case we can say it's for 2 jobs. And then we can say what's the matrix, since the matrix. So we can say that we want to actually test our project on the Python versions, let's say 3.9. So we can define, let's say 3.9, and let's say 3.10. So these are the 2 different versions of Python on which we'll actually test our project. So essentially, if your project has 2 different versions, and of course it will actually test them on these 2 specific versions, on Python version 3.9 and Python version 3.10, and it will test and run this workflow for both these Python versions and test out your workflow on both of these 3.9 and 3.10. Now, of course, once we have done this, we can go ahead and actually start defining our steps. Now, once you actually set up the Python version, we can go ahead and actually define. So, of course, the first thing that we'll do is we'll use the checkout action. So, users, and we'll say check action @actions checkout @v3. This is used to check out our code. And the next one that we'll actually do, first of all, give it a name as, let's say, setup Python version. And of course, what we can actually say is over here we can define this as setup for a particular version of Python. So in order to do that, we can say let's say matrix dot Python version. So essentially, this is what will serve to define, okay, which particular Python version we are actually running this particular action for. So this is what we'll be doing. And then of course over here we'll define the users. So we'll define the users as, let's say, the actions. And for this what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be using an action known as GitHub Actions, known as the setup Python. Now this allows us to actually go ahead and set up Python application within our GitHub Actions. It allows you to download and set up Python packages directly from the help of this particular Python package from this GitHub action. And you can do a lot of other things such as manage your path, manage your Python packages, define which particular Python version you're going to be dealing with. So all of that can be set up with the help of the setup Python GitHub action. So this is the one that you should actually look at. So for this, what we're going to be doing is we are just going to be using the actions setup Python, and then we can use the latest version. So just to confirm what's the latest version, we can go ahead and look at this particular Python on the GitHub actions. So we can view this on the marketplace. So here you can see that the latest version is 4.1.0. So we can just go ahead and copy this and set this up over here. So this would be at the rate 4.1.0. Now the next thing that we'll go ahead and actually do is we'll define that, okay, for which particular Python version do we actually want to use it with. So we'll define with, and within this we'll say the Python version will be fetched from ones that are available right now in the matrix. So we'll essentially take them from here. So we can define this from matrix.python version. So this will allow us to fetch the version for a specific version of Python. And the next thing that of course we can define is again the name. So we can define, let's say, if we want to install all of our dependencies, because that is what we want to do whenever we run this on the Ubuntu latest runner. So for that, if you want to install all the dependencies, we're going to be running the following command. So this essentially would be the Python, again we'll be running this. So this would be Python, and of course we can just define this over here. So we'll just go ahead and do this. So we'll define this as Python and then -m, and then we'll install all the packages, and of course use the upgrade to upgrade them to any particular version. And this is to also upgrade the version of pip, and beneath this we can say pip install, and again using the -r with the requirements.txt to install all the requirements that are going to be there. And once we have actually done that, the next thing that we're actually going to be doing is something quite interesting. So of course, whenever you're pushing out any code, you would ideally want to actually also lint your code. Now in the previous sessions that we took on GitHub Actions, we showed that you can actually use let's say one of the GitHub Actions that actually allows you to do Python linting, which is essentially for Python linting. So you could essentially use something like a Python linter. But what we are actually going to be doing is that we'll be linting our code with something known as Flake8. Now, what exactly is Flake8? It is essentially a library that allows you not just to actually do linting for your code, but it also actually can share some programming errors for some undefined variables, functions, and also looks at your coding style. That's essentially the linting. So it's a much more advanced version. So we can actually define Flake8. So for doing that, the first thing that we'll actually go ahead and do is we will install the package. So we just have to go and do pip install Flake8. We'll just define Flake8 over here, and we'll download this particular library. So we'll define Flake8. And then so since we have used Flake8 now essentially Flake8 allows us to set up some configurations in order to, let's say, skip reviewing some files, because there can be certain times when you might not want to, let's say, specifically search for linting for particular files. So we can actually do a configuration of our Flake8, and for that we'll be defining a .flake8 file. Now over here I have a default configuration that allows you to exclude certain types of files and then ignore certain error codes that might usually be there. For example, like let's say it could be for some undeclared variables. So this is just a sample file that we're going to be using, and we'll be defining our .flake8 configuration file over here inside of our project. So we'll go ahead and say .flake8, and we'll define our configuration over here. Now, in order to actually go ahead and test it out, we just can run the flake8 command, And as you can see that it still actually does show us some of these errors that or warnings. So we can actually go ahead and try to see if we can configure them. For example, if we go to the admin.py, it says that the django.contrib admin has not been used, so we can simply just go ahead and comment that out. Then we have the tests.py. so over here it says that the user has not been used, so we can simply just go ahead and remove that. And for example, over here in views.py, the http response has not been used, so we can again go ahead and do that and comment that out. And over here, for example, again in getting started, we have the URLs in which we don't need at this moment include. We can just simply remove include for now. And if we run flake it again, as you can see that this time it did not comment anything else, so that means we're good to go from the flake it. So essentially, going back to our YAML file, if we want to set up the next action as to actually make sure that our code is written properly, to actually go ahead and lint it with flake it, we can define the next name as lint with flake it, let's say. And this one again, we'll use a run a command to actually go ahead and run this. So we'll say run, and over here we'll define flake 8 dot, and this will allow us to go ahead and actually test out our code. So first let's actually go ahead and test this much of our GitHub action that we have actually prepared. So first we'll just go ahead and push our code, and we'll just commit this commit this code so far. So we'll just say commit and say add initial files, and we'll go ahead and push this. And as soon as we push it, we should see it getting project over here. So, and we should go ahead to our actions, and you can already see okay, so the second all right, so let's just check if the .github file has come or not. Right, so actually this should be over here, actually outside. We'll just move it outside of the project folder, and then just go ahead and commit this again, just to restructure this. And we'll just go ahead and push it, and now it should actually show up as we go ahead and add it over here. Oh, my bad. So I think the .github folder is still over here. Alright, so let's actually move the .github folder right over here, and we'll define our workflows within .github, and we'll just push this. We'll go ahead and push this, so now it should actually come up properly. So yeah, there we go. We should see the action coming here. So you can see right now we have two different ones. So one is for build 3.9, and this is actually starting the job, and this should go ahead and actually okay, so it does give an error. So let's actually see. So it says that actions python setup python version 4.1.0 is not, cannot find it. So let's just quickly see because for some reason it's not able to do that. So never mind, we'll go ahead and actually change it to actually this should have been version 4.1.0. So let's just make this small change, and let's see if this actually works. So let's go ahead and check out our project. We'll go back. This time it should work. So we'll go back to our latest workflow that is running right now, again for version 3.9. is using the checkout at this moment, going ahead and installing all the dependencies. Then it will try to lint it with flake 8 once it installs all the necessary dependencies. So it says that flake 8 is not installed. Oh, that is because we didn't actually include it in the requirements.txt. So we should just go ahead and install flake 8 as part of the requirements.txt, because it, the runner was not able to actually find that. So we'll just go ahead and say commit and add flake 8 to requirements. Perfect. So this should actually work. So we'll just go ahead and push this code, and this should show up inside of our action now, and this should actually work perfectly fine. All right, let's see as it starts. So hopefully this should actually work. So it will now install all the dependencies, and then it'll start to actually lint it. It will do the lint checking with Flake8. Right, so it says successfully installed. So for some reason it says that installing all these successfully, the error was cancelled for some reason. Let's just go ahead and rerun our job just for both these versions. Let's just see if there's something wrong happening right now. Let's just quickly cross check. We have version for build 3.9. So as you can see, like, once the host runner that's provided by GitHub it's set up, then it will of course go ahead and install these dependencies on the Python package. All these dependencies will be installed in this runner. It's currently installing all of these different dependencies. So now we'll just go ahead and test, and we can see that the job has actually successfully run. So what we can actually go ahead and do is we'll move to our next step, and that is actually also write something related to test. So of course, so far what we have done is we have checked out the code, we have gone ahead and we have basically installed all the dependencies, and then of course finally we can also have another one that would be the name. We'll just define the name as let's go ahead and do that. That's the name, and the name would be essentially would be to run the test. So running the tests, and of course the command for that would be run. And then of course, so essentially how you can actually run tests within Django based applications is by using the Python manage.py. So of course you're always going to be using that, but you can write test. So this will take a look at all different files that have the test. For example, over here we have in this over here test.py, so it will try to find all of them, and then it will go ahead and actually do the test for you. Now we can just probably comment this one and just test it out without that. So we can just run the command over here. First try to do that, python 3 manage.py, and then we'll say test. So if we run this, you can see that right now there are 0 tests that has found out. So this can be used. So this is with respect to all of the things that we want to do with respect to the CI/CD, that is being able to check for the dependencies in the code, installing them, linting our code, running our tests, of course. And then the next step that we'll be moving towards is actually going ahead and deploying our code. So in this case, what we're going to be doing is, since we're going to be using Heroku, so we will actually create an account on Heroku if you haven't already, and you can log in into Heroku. In my case, I have already actually created an account within Heroku, so I'll just go ahead and log in into my account. I'll just actually put this on later for now. So we'll just cancel this and we'll go ahead to our dashboard. So we'll go ahead and actually create a new application. We'll just call it Django GitHub Action. So let's see if we can create this. Alright, great. And we'll go ahead and actually copy this. Of course, we'll be using this information. So there are going to be 2 things that we're going to be doing. The first one being we're going to be setting up actually 2 different environments secrets inside of our project. So we'll go ahead and go to our secrets and going to our actions, which will be defining these secrets. So the first one is the name of our app. So in this case, we can say that we can call this as the Heroku API name. So let's say actually app name. That would be a better representation. We'll create this, and then of course we can always go ahead to our account and get the API key for our account. That will be used to actually help to be able to for our workflow to authenticate and log in into our I'll just go ahead and regenerate the key just for this reference, and let's actually go ahead and copy this key, and we will go ahead and create a new repository secret. We'll give the name as the Heroku API key. So we'll give it the name of Heroku API key, and we'll go ahead and we have created these 2 repository secrets that now we'll be able to actually utilize from our application. So the next step is that, of course, the first thing that we did was create a job for the build. Of course, the next job that we'll create would be for deployment. So we can actually call that as deploy. Let's say, so we'll call that as deploy. And there are certain GitHub actions that you can use. Again, there are a few that are specifically for Python, and you can search for Heroku. So in order to actually deploy Django to Heroku, so you can see over here one of the famous ones is the Heroku Django deploy. Again, the usage you can see is pretty simple. The first thing that you do is use the checkout, and then you share a few different items such as the app name, API key, the Heroku email address with which you have created the account, then whether you actually want to use a Git, or like let's say it has some other options such as being able to also use a Docker container registry in case you're using Docker for containerizing your application, and then of course the branch that you want to use alongside your project. So of course nowadays we are not supporting master, it's main. So we'll be using one of these GitHub actions today. So the first thing within our job is to actually define, again, the first thing would be to runs on, to define what is the runner. So in this case, we'll define the runs on as, again, Ubuntu latest. And the next thing we'll define is the name. So of course, our name for this particular is to actually go ahead and deploy our application to Heroku. So, and this being a Django based application. So of course, now starting with the steps. So the first step is, again, as usual, the checkout. So you can just simply go ahead and use this checkout. Of course, that's great. The next thing that we'll go ahead and actually do is we'll give the name. So we can actually also give it this give a name to it. So that would be checkout. The next one that we'll give is actually defining our action that we want to give. So in this case, let's give it an action of deploy. So the one that we are also going to be using is one provided by Aki Lechtiner. So there is this one that is quite famous that actually works with multiple ones, which is the Heroku deploy. So we are going to be using this in our repository. So here you can see how we can actually go ahead and use it. So we can just copy the usage from here, and we can define it over here. So this uses this, and we can just forward this. All right, that should be fine. So this is actually the action that we are going to be using. And over here, the app name, instead of this, we can simply put the secrets, and instead of this, we'll have the app name. And then over here, we'll define our email. So in this case, this would be my email that I'm going to be putting in. There you go. So we have put in all of this information. Now, apart from that, the additional thing that we can also define is which particular branch do we want to use. So in this case, the branch that we'll be using is going to be main branch, and this should be good enough. So let's actually go ahead and check this out if we are actually able to run this. So first, let's just go ahead and deploy our code. All right, let's go ahead and do that. So just add deploy step in GitHub Actions, and we'll go ahead and push this. Now let's see if this actually can work. Let's go ahead and see our action. Okay, so let's just refresh. For some reason it already just crashed. Oh, there's an error in the syntax. Let's just go ahead and see line number 36. All right, so this should be good enough. Just quickly check if this is fine. So we have the step, we have the deploy, and we'll be using this. All right, let's just go ahead and push this change. Let's see if this works. We'll go ahead to our actions, and okay, there appears to be an issue. The YAML syntax on line number 35. Let's go ahead and check that. This is actions at the checkout v3. So let's just quickly check what might be the issue. So this is the name, then we have provided the actions, checkout v3. This appears to be fine, and then we have the name. Alright, this should be fine now. Alright, so let's go ahead and push this. So once we have pushed this, let's actually go ahead and see if this actually works. So the first thing is the build being running. Let's just see if this works. So it's installing all the dependencies, running the lint, and all of this does work. So this should work properly, and now it's going ahead and setting up the deploy. So it has already checked out the code, and now it's proceeding with deployment to our Heroku application that we have created. So it's currently in the process of deployment. So our first thing, that is the build, actually did work correctly. So it's now going ahead and trying out the deploy. Let's see if it is able to do that successfully. So it will first, of course, log into the Heroku using the credentials that it is able to fetch from the GitHub secrets, and then it will proceed towards the next step. That is actually going ahead and checking out the code. So here, as you can see, that it was able to actually successfully deploy. Now, if I go back to our account settings, and if we go back to our applications in the dashboard, and we check out the Django GitHub action, if we open up the application, as you can see, it's deployed. We should ideally see yes. So this is the deployed application. As you can see that it has been deployed onto Heroku. Now if I push any changes, for instance, let's say if I go to our secrets, let's say to one of the templates and to an index template, let's say with GitHub Actions tutorial. So let's actually go ahead and save this, and if you make a small change, we'll just say we have made change to index HTML, and we'll push it. Let's see if it actually is able to update the application, and we are able to see that over here. So we'll go back to our actions right now and see if it actually is able to run this successfully. So right now it's building, and then of course it will go ahead and also deploy it. Now another thing that you can actually do is provide a dependency. Like let's say, of course, you wouldn't want to deploy a code that does not pass through the test cases, or it does not actually properly build. So you can use the needs where you can actually make one particular build actually be dependent on other. So if you have, let's say, two different type of jobs, you can actually make the deploy job dependent on your build job. So only if the build job will actually pass, only then your deploy will actually run. So over here you can see that it has successfully deployed. So we should actually see that changes appear over here. So if I refresh, you can see that we got the updated index.html page with the GitHub Actions tutorial. So this way, whenever you make some changes to your code and you actually go ahead and push it, you can see that the the automated pipeline that actually runs. So in order to just go ahead and demonstrate the other part that I was showing, basically telling you all about, is essentially the way to be able to actually handle scenarios where you might need one of your build steps to actually be dependent on another one. So how can we actually go ahead and handle such kind of a scenario? So that is what we are actually going to be looking at in terms of how you can actually handle such kind of scenarios where you might have one or more dependent issues. So we'll go ahead and we'll go back to our GitHub action and to our workflows, and over here within the deploy one, right, we'll basically use the needs, and essentially in that case we have to define which particular job you actually want it to be dependent on. So in this case, let's say that we are going to be using the build, and over here what we'll do is just to sort of test it out, we'll make a conscious issue with one of, let's say, for example, we can uncomment this, and if we run flake right now, it will actually show us. So what we'll do is that we'll now just push this change, and we'll see that how this actually affects the deployment. So we'll say added needs to GitHub action, and we'll push this change, and let's see how this actually handles. So we'll go back, we'll go to our actions again, we'll see at the latest workflow run, and over here, of course, we see our summary. So right off the bat, you can see that we do not actually see our particular step, that is the job for deploy right before. So first it will actually run the build, and only then later on it will actually showcase if this is successful. So as you can see that the process actually just failed. and that is why, since it failed, the deploy one wasn't actually even done. It was completely skipped. Similar to this, you can actually go ahead and test out deploying your Django project to other actions as well. So for example, if you just go to the GitHub Actions marketplace, we can specifically see for Django and let's say DigitalOcean. So if I specifically search for this, we can specifically search for, let's say, Django, and you can see there are like, ones for migration checker specifically, right? Because sometimes you might want to migrate your data. So there are all these different types of actions, and of course you can also create your own action. We'll create a video in the future where we'll show you how you can actually create your own GitHub action and then get that published to the GitHub Actions marketplace as well. But yes, you find essentially dedicated actions for a specific use cases, and of course one of the most popular ones being the one that is the setup Python, which allows you to actually go ahead and do a lot of different things, such as being able to manage dependencies, install packages, and then set up like the test and all. So you can manage all of that with the help of the setup Python. But yes, that is what we want to first of all showcase in terms of how you can actually set up your GitHub action very easily with the Django based project. Of course, the Django based project might have a lot more other dependencies. You can actually combine, since it's a backend framework, you can combine it with, let's say, a front end in React or in Next.js or any other framework, and you can write additional or separate workflows dedicated for your front end. Let's say if you want to deploy your front end project to Netlify or to Vercel, how you can do that? You can again very similarly define your credentials, because you have dedicated actions, let's say for front end frameworks like Vercel deployment. Similarly, you'll have them for Netlify, and again it's very easy to use these. You just have to again define your secrets, and it will be able to fetch your secrets and then able to go ahead and do all these different activities. And of course, we just showed for Heroku. You can use it for any other cloud platform like Azure, GCP, AWS, and you can automate all of that with the help of GitHub Actions. But of course, GitHub Actions are not just the specific CI/CD tool. There are other tools, but of course, what makes it useful is that if you are having a lot of GitHub projects, then you get the CI/CD tool inbuilt to your GitHub repository with the help of GitHub Actions. So in case again you have any questions with respect to our tutorial on GitHub Actions with Django, do feel free to ask them in the comments, and we'll be coming up with a lot more other GitHub Actions and of course CI/CD related content in the near future. So stay tuned for that. Thank you very much.